Watsey, and I am the host of Liquid Lunch. So grab a big glass of water and join us for an interesting talk today. 'Cause today we have the program specialist at RWA who manages the Regional Water Authority's recreation program, and his name is Jeff Yale. I'm really excited about today's show. We're going to talk a lot about the great outdoors. We're going to talk about this recreation program that the Regional Water Authority has up and running. We actually have a lot of locations where folks in the greater New Haven area can take advantage of the great outdoors and take advantage of all this wonderful space we have. So, again, welcome to Liquid Lunch. And before we get started talking about the recreation programs, Jeff, as I told you before the show, we like to really talk about our guests. I like to let them tell their story. So, with that, tell us your story. How did you get to be the program specialist? How long have you been at the water company? Tell us your story.
Well, thanks for having me, Kevin. Well, I've always had a interest in the outdoors. Always been an avid hunter, fisherman. Growing up, I started my career path really in high school, going to Lyman Hall High School in Wallingford and participating in their agricultural education program there, specializing in natural resources. From there, I went to the University of Maine at Orono, and I got my degree graduating 1999 with a degree in wildlife ecology. So trying to stick with that path is a little bit difficult unless you wind up getting a job with the DEEP or one of the other governmental organizations. But I was lucky enough to pick up a part-time job working for the Regional Water Authority on the recreation staff at the time. So I would spend my summers working at Lake Saltonstall and working on the trails there. Eventually, in 2006, I was hired full-time by the RWA and had a position that basically had me doing a little bit of everything for many different departments. And then in 2009, they gave me the responsibility of managing the recreation staff. So I've been doing that ever since. It's great to have a job that lets me be partially inside, especially in some of those rainy days. But then also have a chance to get outside and be on the trails, working with a great group of people that I manage, and just doing kind of something that I've always loved to do.
That's great. So 18 years with the water company,
Mm-hmm.
and 15 doing what you're doing now. And I'm so glad you're here today. You made time for us because I really feel like the recreation program is one of these hidden gems of the water company. For those of you listening who may not know, I've been doing water communications now for almost 20 years. This is my third water company, and I've never known a water company to have a program such as the RWA's recreation program. So I really wanted Jeff to come in today and talk about the recreation program. Why we have it, what it offers, how do you become a part of it, everything soup to nuts about the recreation program. So I actually will start with the most basic of questions that I actually asked when I started with the RWA. Why does a drinking water utility have a recreation program?
Well, with the RWA, when they became the South Central Connecticut Regional Water Authority from the New Haven Water Company, part of their founding legislation was to have land that was open to recreation. So it's a great idea, instead of fencing off everything and putting up barbed wire and no trespassing, keep out signs, that we allow some passive recreation and use of our lands. And it also allows some of our permit holders to be our eyes and ears on the properties. Because we own so much land, we
How
can.
much?
I think we have almost 27,000 acres of land. So that's spread out across a wide area. So when we have people out on our land, hiking, fishing, cross-country skiing, whatever, they respect the land. They love to be out there. So if something isn't quite right, they're letting us know about it.
And so why would, and I love that. So you have this land, you want to share it with people because it's beautiful land. Why would a water company own 27,000 acres of land?
Well, we really try and keep the land preserved and protected for watershed protection. So if we want to keep things from getting dumped on the land, to prevent erosion, anything that would affect water quality. Because first and foremost, we are a water company. We're going to get water out of your faucet no matter what. That's our main goal. So whatever we could do to make it easier for us to keep the water clean, to keep chemicals out, to keep pollutants out, make it easier for us to even clean it in the end. So if it's cleaner to start with, it's a lot easier and faster to get it to the point where we want it and it meets the high water quality standards that we like to get out of your faucets.
So this is really the land that's surrounding the waters where we get our water for drinking water. So we're really protecting that land, which means we're protecting our water.
Correct. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So the water company owns this land. There's a lot of the land, and it was decided long before either Jeff and I worked there that this land would be shared with the customer. So as I thought about this conversation today, and there's a million different ways we could have really talked about this recreation program. We could talk about activities. There's a whole bunch of ways we can talk about it, but I thought the simplest way for our listeners to hear about this would really to go location by location, because there's 8 or 9 recreation areas within the RWA's footprint. And I thought the easiest way, we could just start with one area and we'll just kind of go location by location, talk about what's available at each of those locations, maybe if there's anything unique about those locations, anything that visitors should know about those locations. And with that, I wanted to start with the Big Gulf recreation area. So let's start with Big Gulf, talk a little bit about where it is, what kind of features Big Gulf has, what you can do there, what you can't do there, things like that. So tell us a little bit about Big Gulf.
Sure. Big Gulf is located in Northford, Connecticut. The parking for it is at Northford Park. You'd park there, and then you have to walk across the park all the way to the back. There's a fenced area in the back by the soccer fields. So all of our recreation areas, the main entrances all have combination locks on them. So annual permit holders get the combination to the lock, and they could be on our property sunrise to sunset. So once you're at the Big Gulf property, we have about 5 distinct marked trails. There's different colored blazes that are also different shapes to distinguish the trails. And there's over 6.5 miles of trails on this property. So it's a good distance. You can kind of do a loop on some of the trails. Some of the trails are just little spur connector trails that we have there. At Big Gulf, we do offer some stream fishing. There's a small dammed area where you could go and catch some bass and bluegills and things like that in that area. But on all of our properties, we allow hiking, cross-country skiing in the winter, and snowshoeing in the winter, jogging, the general passive recreation like that. As we get into some of the other properties, I'll tell you about some of the more unique things that are allowed there. But for Big Gulf, it's mostly a hiking area. We don't allow bikes there. Some we do, and we'll talk about that when we get to the other ones.
You mentioned fishing, and I guess I'll just ask this now and see if it applies to all the areas where you're allowed to fish. Are you allowed to keep the fish? Is it in accordance with your fishing permit, or do we make folks, catch and release?
Nope. You can keep the fish, and people always ask me that if you have to release them or if they're good to eat. Well, since we are drinking water reservoirs mostly, the water is pristine. So these are some of the best fish to be able to eat if you do want to keep them. But it's just in accordance with state laws. We do have a few stricter regulations on a few properties with slot limits and different size limits on fish. But everybody does need their Connecticut inland fishing license to fish on the property if you are 16 years of age or older. So it's nothing that's included with our permit. You need our recreation permit just to be on the property, and if you intend to fish, you need Connecticut's inland fishing license.
And you mentioned how pristine the water is. I think I mentioned this on our last show, but one of the things that I was surprised and gratified to learn when I moved to Connecticut and started working for the RWA is some of the regulations in the state of Connecticut around drinking water, source water regulations, and how truly protected it is. In Connecticut, there's wastewater plants, sewer plants, and they clean the water and they send it out into different waterways. And in Connecticut, you cannot dump that outflow from the sewer plants into drinking water sources. That's not true of every state. I worked in New Jersey for many years, and we would have intakes for our drinking water plants that were a half a mile downstream of a sewer outflow pipe. So, Connecticut really does have this pristine source water, and the RWA owning this land helps to keep it that way as well. So just wanted to throw that in there about, it really is pristine source. So that's Big Gulf. So about 6.5 miles of trails. What about Genesee? Genesee's one I've actually been to. It's kind of off the beaten path a little bit. So tell us a little bit about Genesee.
Yep. Well, Genesee is located in Guilford and Madison. Part of the town lines run through the property there. That property has 6 distinct trails that we have blazed on there, and that totals up to 9.6 miles of trails. On Genesee, like I said, all of them have the hiking. There isn't really any fishing at Genesee, so you're not getting any sort of reservoir or giant streams that are worthwhile to get a beautiful vista on or anything like that. But one thing that is unique about Genesee is it's one of the properties we do allow mountain biking. So the trails that we allow it on are our main improved trails. They're marked on the maps that you receive as a permit holder, and you need to stay on those trails with your mountain bikes. We don't allow bushwhacking or creating new trails, cutting through the woods for safety reasons and mainly for erosion reasons. We don't want bikes creating new trails, eroding the plant life and getting more sediment into our reservoirs. Another unique thing about Genesee, it's one of the areas where we allow horseback riding.
Oh.
So we have a special horseback riding permit. When you sign up for permits, you could select that option. And horses, if they are to go to Genesee, they need to park at the Race Hill Road entrance. It's a backside.
The horses or the horse
the
owners?
the horse trailers. Yeah, because our main parking lot to access Genesee is off of Route 79, and it's a very sharp turn off of a very busy road and a very small parking lot. So you're not going to really get a horse trailer in there. So the back entrance is where, if you were to bring a horse trailer and have horses, you can go in there. And again, we have distinct marked trails on the map of where the horses can go on that property. And you do need the additional permit authorization from us to bring them there.
See, this is where I learned something, because I didn't know we allowed horses on our property. Do we have a lot of folks that have that horse permit?
Not really. We'll talk, I know when we get to Lake Chamberlain, that's where we have some other horse riding allowed, but that's through a whole nother permit system.
Yeah. So, and you've heard Jeff talk a couple of times now about permitting and all that. Towards the end of the show, we're going to talk about the permit structure, how you get your permit, the cost, and all that good stuff. So just hold tight on that. So that's Genesee. Where's Genesee again? What town?
Genesee is the Guilford-Madison area.
Guilford-Madison area. So, and all the information you're going to hear today can be found on the RWA's website. That's rwater.com. You'll see maps of all of the areas and what activities you can do with those areas. So let's move a little bit north now. We'll kind of come across the river, move a little bit north. Talk about Lake Bethany, which I can only assume is in Bethany, Connecticut.
You are correct on that one.
See?
So Bethany has 5 blaze trails there. A little bit shorter on mileage. It totals up to about 3.8 miles of trails. It's interesting. You have to be a little careful there. Where the parking lot is, there's trails that lead directly from the parking lot that go down. But to access the trails around the lake, you need to cross the street. So where you park, cross the street, you could enter in. The trails make just about almost a complete loop around. You come out on roads on either side that you would have to cross. So it doesn't make a fully protected, connected trail. With Lake Bethany, though, we need to stress that there is no fishing at this location. So it is one of our lakes, but it's one that we don't allow fishing in. So it's beautiful to walk around and get great views and see the different wildlife, and to hike and jog around and, again, cross-country ski, snowshoe and stuff. but we don't allow bikes there and no fishing.
So why no fishing for Bethany?
For distribution, they often draw the lake down at drastic levels, so there's a large fluctuation between the high point and low point. So they don't want anybody going out. It gets very muddy and very shallow at times like that. So for safety and for the ecosystem there, it's one that we keep that restricted to no fishing.
And for folks who are not in the water industry, distribution is the department within our company that kind of handles taking water out of our water sources, getting them into the treatment, getting the water into the treatment plants, and then getting it out into the system, the distribution system.
There you go.
So I have personal experience with Bethany. I hiked around it last year a couple times. It's beautiful in the winter when the leaves are down and you can really see the lake. It's quite a nice walk. But you're right. It is one of those things where you have to walk on the road a little bit. But it's well worth it. And I happen to live 10 minutes from there, so it's a nice, convenient area for me to go to. So let's stay in the Bethany area now. The RWA has another area, Lake Chamberlain. So tell us a little bit about Chamberlain.
Okay, Lake Chamberlain, you're just very close to Lake Bethany, just down the road a bit. And it goes into the Woodbridge area, too. The town of Woodbridge and Bethany kind of get divided, part of that property. There we actually have 10 trail segments. There is a beautiful long loop that goes completely around the lake, very level. If you were to hike all the trail segments at once, it would be 6.7 miles of trails. But I think the loop around the lake, I think, is only just over 3. So it's very nice and level there. Shaded, there's some good pine trees. A lot of people like to go and hike through that area. And we do allow fishing there. So if you're disappointed you can't fish at Bethany, just down the road, you can go and fish at Lake Chamberlain.
What kind of fish am I catching in Lake Chamberlain?
Lake Chamberlain is all basically your normal warm water fish, like largemouth bass, bluegills, panfish, yellow perch. I've had reports of eels being caught in there. But we don't stock it, so you're not going to find any trout in there. If you do, it maybe got there a native trout coming down the stream or at one time, but we do not stock it with anything. But from what I've heard is there are some good-sized panfish in there, and I've seen a few nice bass come out of there, some fishermen with some nice fish.
Great. So we don't stock Chamberlain, but we do stock some of the others we're going to talk about, correct?
Correct, yes.
Yeah. So if you're disappointed, like you said, you can't fish in Bethany, just hop in your car a little while and drive down to Chamberlain. I have not been to Chamberlain yet, but I do plan on going there sometime soon. So I'm going to take a quick pause right now and let everybody know what they're listening to. If you just joined us, you are listening to Liquid Lunch with the Regional Water Authority. Today we're talking about the Regional Water Authority's recreation programs. We're systematically going through each of the recreation areas, letting everybody know what you can and cannot do with those areas. And at the end of the show, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the other recreation outdoor type things that the RWA has. We're also going to talk a little bit about the RWA's police department, which most people don't know the RWA has a police department, but I promise you if you stick around long enough, we're going to tie it into why we're talking about recreation. So once again, grab that tall glass of water and join us for some liquid lunch. Let's move kind of back a little bit to where we started over to Lake Hammonasset in Madison and Sugarloaf in Guilford. I kind of wanted to talk about those at the same time because I think they're kind of similar in the activities they offer and kind of the area that they're in. So let's, I guess, start with Hammonasset and tell us a little bit about that area.
Okay. Lake Hammonasset in Madison, we have 8 different blaze trails in that area, and that totals up to over 10 miles of hiking trails.
Just at Hammonasset?
Yes.
Wow.
It's a large lake, and it has many little peninsulas and pockets there that the trails will follow right along the shoreline. So it creates quite a distance for hiking. Again, Lake Hammonasset, it's a lake that we do not allow fishing in. Like I've said before, similar to Bethany, there's some very high fluctuations in the water levels there. So we're just keeping people out of that for fishing.
Really a safety issue.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And what confuses some people that it's Lake Hammonasset is not Hammonasset State Park.
That confused me, by the way, when I first moved to Connecticut.
Yep, they're not far from each other. So if you have a beach pass and you think you're going to Hammonasset State Park, that does not allow you to get into our property. They're completely different entities, even though they're both a Hammonasset name. So again, Sugarloaf, not Sugarloaf, Lake Hammonasset. Very nice hiking, beautiful trails there, good views of the lake there. For fishing, even though you can't fish in the reservoir, downstream from the reservoir, past our dam, it goes on to some state land along the roadway, and that does get stocked by the state with trout. So if you're looking to fish, it's kind of off of our property on the edge down below. You can fish there, but not in the reservoir where it's dammed up.
Great. So that's Lake Hammonasset, not Hammonasset State Park.
Correct.
And what about Sugarloaf in Guilford?
Sugarloaf in Guilford, there's 5 blazed trails there that total up to 4.3 miles of trails. There aren't really any water features to look at there, but if you're looking for a more difficult hike, it's a lot of elevation changes, some very steep, rocky trails. But it's also one of our least used trails. So if you're looking for some peaceful hiking without running into hardly anybody, that Sugarloaf is the place to go to.
So that's our meditation trail.
Yeah,
Maybe.
it's our least used and a little bit more rugged, which may be why that not too many people are up for the exercise. But if you're looking for a workout, that's one to go to.
So maybe once you get a little experience at Chamberlain and some of the others, you go over to Sugarloaf and test out your experience a little bit. Great. So we're jumping around a little bit geographically. So I'm going to jump back over to the Woodbridge area. The RWA has a recreation area we call Pine Hill. So what's going on at Pine Hill?
At Pine Hill, we have only 4 blazed trails, and that totals up to about 3.4 miles of trails. It's the one rec area that doesn't really have a locked gate on it. We actually have a landowner that has a house historically that's at the entrance to the rec area. So it's like you're driving in a driveway. So we do have a gate there, but we leave it unlocked for the landowner there to get through.
So don't get confused if you think you're pulling into somebody's driveway.
Correct, yeah. And we just ask that the permit holders park to the left-hand side where it has the rec area. There's a porta potty on that side, and just about all of our rec areas have some sort of porta potty facilities there on the properties or something very close by. So the trails, one thing, we had acquired Pine Hill when RWA got Birmingham Utilities. It was part of the deal there. And they had set up an interpretive trail. So if you're hiking there, you may come across trees or posts with different numbers on them. So we have a booklet that you could get from us, and it has kind of different nature scenes or descriptions of what was in the area. So some may be a marker on a tree, and it will say this is an oak tree or this is a white pine tree. Or it may tell about something that went on in the area. Historically, this was a timber harvest, or this stone wall was here for some particular reason. So you can learn a bit about the history of the area and nature if you follow along with the guidebook.
I love that so much. I wish every tree came with a label to tell me what it is. I used to live in Washington, D.C., and on Capitol Hill, they've labeled most of the trees. So as you're walking along Capitol Hill, you can see, oh, that's a dogwood, things like that. But I guess now with artificial intelligence and our smartphones, it's pretty easy with certain apps to just snap a picture of a tree and it tells you exactly what it is, which is great because there's so many times I see trees or plants and I always wonder what it is, and I use my phone and now I know what it is. So that's really cool that's there, and that we've maintained that since bringing that utility into our utility family. Our last 2 locations we're going to talk about are the ones that offer the most activities for visitors, and I'm going to start with Maltby Lake. So let's talk a little bit about where Maltby Lake is and the many activities offered there.
Sure. Maltby, it's kind of on the border of New Haven and Orange. Goes through that area. Right up the road on Route 34 is the entrance up by Yale University, by the Yale Bowl up in that area. It's a great area. It's made up of 3 separate lakes, so there's plenty of shoreline fishing between the 3 lakes. The hiking there, it's 8 distinct blaze trails that total up to 4.3 miles of hiking. Those lakes we do actually stock. We buy trout from a private hatchery in Connecticut, and this year we put 1,550 trout into the lakes, kind of divided up evenly between the 3. We also purchase some large tagged trout that we put in the lakes there. So those are kind of a bonus. So not only would you be catching about a 20-inch trout, but if you give us the tag number, we prefer you take the tag out and give us the tag. But if you're catch and release and don't want to worry about harming the fish, just get a good picture of that tag. Send it on over to us with your permit information and your address, and we'll give you a gift card for catching that fish too.
So we have a contest.
Yep, we kind of have an ongoing contest. So
how many tagged fish are out there at Maltby?
We put 12 in every year.
Okay.
So whether some survive multiple years and are still in there, there could be. If some got taken away by the eagles or ospreys, they're not getting the prize. They're not telling us about that. But in addition to the trout, the state of Connecticut has put catfish in those lakes too.
Oh.
So there's some impressive sized catfish. They did a survey last year and went out and checked on the fish populations for that. And they told us that there were some large, about 8-pound catfish that they came across.
Nice.
So it's also great. It's a bass fishing lake. So we do have a slot limit on the bass. You have to be aware of the size if you want to keep any of them there. So there's the bass, there's yellow perch, there's crappie, there's all sorts of bluegill. It's a good fishery. It's fairly shallow. It doesn't get more than 29 feet deep there. So there's a lot of acreage and a lot of shoreline access.
So has anybody, to your knowledge, caught a tagged trout that you've kind of gone back and said, wow, that was put in 5 years ago? Have you ever...
Usually it's been from that year.
Really?
I think maybe once in all the years that I've been involved in this where there was a fish from the previous year.
And if you do send us a picture, we'll put it up on our Facebook page, on the Recreations Facebook page for all the world to see.
All right, you'll be an instant fishing celebrity.
There you go. So there's fishing, there's hiking, jogging. Can you ride your bike?
Yes,
Maltby?
Maltby is one of the other areas that we do allow mountain biking on. And again, we just ask that you stay on the main trails where it's approved for the mountain biking. And the bikes that we allow, they need to be pedal powered. We don't allow electric powered bikes or dirt bikes of any sorts on the property. So nothing with a motor on it. You got to use your own 2 feet to pedal that thing and make it up the hills and around the corners.
Yeah, we're going to talk about ATVs towards the end of the show, and any motorized vehicles. Do you need, if you want a mountain bike, do you need any kind of special permit like you do with the horses, or?
Nope,
No?
that's included with your normal recreation permit.
Great. And the last location I want to talk about, I think, is the one that has the most for folks to do, and that is Lake Saltonstall. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on in Saltonstall?
Sure. Saltonstall is in the Branford area. Access is off of Hosley Avenue. We go down, you could go drive in there, and it's a beautiful reservoir that's almost 3 miles long and over 100 feet deep in the center. So it's very popular because we do have fishing there, and we also rent boats to go fishing there. So you could go hiking. Again, it's one of the other 3 areas that we allow mountain biking. You can mountain bike on some of the trails there. But the key draw is the fishing. And it's unique in that the state it's part of the walleye program that the state instituted. So since we do have a large population of alewives in the lake, we were chosen with a few other lakes around to have walleye in there. So every fall we purchase fingerling size walleye, which are like 3 to 6 inches, and those get stocked in conjunction with the state stocking with the other lakes in the state. Walleye have been coming out. I've seen some good 6-pound walleye in the years. They must be 18 inches to keep. So they do grow, and people go out after those. And it's also a trophy bass lake by the state designation. So there's very good largemouth bass fishing. And we've also noticed a lot of smallmouth bass coming out of there in recent years. We're not sure who put them in there, but they're in there.
Is that a bad thing that they're in there?
Well, talking to the state, we'd prefer nobody be illegally stocking any fish in any water body. You don't know the ecological consequences of that. If you look back in a lot of the history of nature and people stocking animals that aren't native, it usually is a bad thing. But when the state did their research, they're not really affecting anything there. So they don't know who put them in there. We didn't put them in, but they're doing well, and they're coming out. They're a great fighting fish, too. Pound for pound, they fight harder than any largemouth or any other fish you're going to find in freshwater.
So we're not seeing any kind of environmental impacts from them being in there. That's good.
Nope.
So you said you can rent boats. I want to talk a little bit about that. I got a lot of questions, actually. So can I bring my own boat?
No.
No.
We do not want any personal boats of any kind in any of our reservoirs.
Why is that?
Well, you could get hitchhikers on the bottom of your boat, and we're trying to keep out any sort of invasive species. The biggest detriment to our water would be zebra mussels. If the polyps are riding on a kayak or a boat or a trailer or anything and got into our reservoirs, they tend to take a home in some of the pipes, and they will clog up any sort of pipes. So since our reservoirs are used to get drinking water out of, it would completely damage the system. Yeah, the whole system would be clogged up in no time. And they're also terrible for the ecosystem, where they'll filter out a lot of the plankton and things like that and cause a huge disruption in the fish populations because of the food chain that they disrupt in there. So we don't have them in our lakes that we're aware of, and we're doing our hardest to keep them out. So the easiest is just to say, hey, nothing's coming in from other water bodies. Even the people we do allow you to bring in your own electric motor and put it on our rental boats, those need to be cleaned in a Clorox solution. We have a dunk tank there to put the motors in, just to try and clean off anything that may be on there. But we do have a lot of the fishermen who come down. They're great about it. A lot of them are regulars, and usually their motors aren't going anywhere else either. They're coming to our lake every weekend and using basically the same things in our reservoir.
I imagine Salt and Stall is probably not as busy as some of the other like state fishing areas, just because it's ours and you need a permit. Is that a good assumption?
It is. We do have the people who know about it, and they tend to go down and use it religiously. And we also only have 18 aluminum boats and 5 kayaks at the moment. So they're all first come, first serve. So once those go out for the day, then you're restricted to fishing from the shoreline or from our fishing dock that we have that goes out to get you into some deeper water, which is especially good when the weeds start growing up in the summertime close to the shoreline.
And when are there hours where boat rentals are available? Is it sun up to sundown?
Well, you could fish on the property sunrise to sunset with a recreation permit. But if you want to rent a boat, then our days that we rent them are Tuesdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. And you could rent a boat from 6 a.m. until 1 p.m. So the boats have to be back at the dock by 1. So basically you could rent a boat for 7 hours from us and get a good amount of fishing in that time in the morning.
And how much does that cost?
The boats start out, it's a different system. So if you just want the boat to row or the kayak, it starts at $20, which I don't think there's anywhere in the state that you could find a 7-hour rental for $20.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
If your arms aren't that great and you want to get a motor for the boat, then we have the next tier would be $40. So you could get a boat with a motor or a battery. So some fishermen like to bring their own battery and just rent a motor from us, or the opposite, they'll bring their own motor and just rent a battery from us. So you could do that for $40, or you could get the whole package for $50. So boat, motor, and battery, 7 hours, go fishing all morning, $50.
That's a pretty good deal.
Right.
So we have all these areas where we allow fishing. Do we ever host any kind of tournaments, any kind of competitive fishing going on at any of these sites?
We do. We try and make things a little bit fun for our fishermen out there. And we also try and get kids out fishing. So coming up in May, I think it's May 19th, we have a kids fishing derby coming at the Maltby Lakes. It's 9 until noon. And any child of a permit holder that is under the age of 16 can come out and fish. We're giving out prizes in 4 different age categories to the biggest fish. And then at Salt and Stall, we do a cash bass fishing tournament. So anybody who comes down for that day, it's generally a $25 buy-in. And then whatever money comes in, the amount of fishermen gets divided up and usually given out for second and third place.
Sweet.
And we have one coming up in June and then one in July. So the exact dates, you could look on your newsletter that comes out quarterly to annual permit holders, and on our recreation Facebook page. We always post everything on there, so that's the best place to get updates about specific dates.
Great. And before we get into the recreation permits, I just wanted to take a quick second and talk about another thing that the recreation program does. It's weekend education programs. So I've been to quite a few of these since starting at the water company. A lot of folks actually don't realize that the RWA has an entire environmental department. We have a forester, we have an arborist, we have invasive species specialists, we have watershed management specialists, and those folks are generous enough that on certain weekends throughout the year, they'll actually conduct educational tours of these areas to talk about different topics. So just this past weekend, there was one on invasive species, and that was in Prospect. That was at one of our properties in Prospect. And the nice thing about these weekend programs is they try and do them at some of the locations that are not normally open to the public. But they've done ones on winter tree identification. We actually did a water class with microscopes where we had kids come in and look at water under microscopes. So while you have all of this great access to the recreation areas, we're also trying to educate by offering these programs. I know we're doing tree walks and butterfly walks. They did an owl walk over the winter.
That's very popular.
That's very popular. I think they had about 80 people at the last one, and the gentleman with our company that runs it always starts it off by saying, if you want to guarantee to see an owl, go to a zoo, because it's one of those things that you're never guaranteed, but he tries his darndest to get the owls to come out. And I don't remember if we saw one at the last one that he did, but so that's another thing. If you are a permit holder, we send you a newsletter every quarter, and that newsletter has those events listed in it. And Jeff, if I wanted to become a permit holder, what's involved in that?
It's very easy to do. The easiest way is to go online to our website, and you could sign up on there. It takes you through the whole process. It's very inexpensive to do. The individual permit starts at $25 for the year, and it's a year from when you buy it. So it's not like your Connecticut fishing license that ends December 31st. This goes a full 365 from the date of purchase. And an individual permit actually gets you a permit in your name and an extra permit that says guest. So you could bring any adult guest with you with that guest permit. They can't come alone and just use the guest permit. You need to be with them. And kids under 18, under your supervision, don't need a permit. So you could get that. And then what we call our family permit. So for $35 for the year, extra $10, you get 2 permits in specific people's names. So 2 adults and then 2 that say guest. So you could actually bring 4 adults down, and then again the kids, and use our properties with that. You get the combination to our locks on the parking lots, and you get your little pass and a little parking pass to put on your vehicle so we know that you're authorized to be on the property. And then if you want additional savings, we offer 2-year permits. So those go down and are a little bit discounted there. And we also offer discounts to students, seniors, and veterans.
That's great. So, we have these permits, and if you're listening at home or in your car or anywhere else, you may be asking, well, how is that enforced, right? Well, that's where the RWA Police Department comes in that I mentioned earlier in the show. The RWA does have a police department with, I think we're up to 5 or 6 officers
I
right
think 6 now. Yeah.
Yeah, 6. And one of their main duties is to patrol these recreation areas, checking for trespassers, making sure folks have their permits and are in the areas they're allowed to be in. One of the other things that they do actually is another thing I brought up is ATVs. So as Jeff said, we do not allow any motorized vehicles on our recreation areas and our watershed properties. And our police department tries to make sure, working with the local jurisdictions, making sure that those vehicles are not in there. So you may ask, why? Why can't I take my ATV into Salt and Stall? So Jeff, why can't I bring my ATV into Salt and Stall or any other place?
A big thing is the erosion of the trails. Safety is a huge concern, where if you're hiking down the trail and all of a sudden you come around the corner and someone's flying down it on an ATV, there could be a huge accident there. And then there could be just regular accidents with people driving, hitting some loose stone or something like that and flipping it, and it causes a giant liability issue there. We like to keep it somewhat pristine, and you don't want to be hearing motors revving while you're out there trying to enjoy scenery. A lot of people are out there to enjoy nature, to see the animals. You're really scaring things away if you're humming along out there. So, I mean, if you have an ATV and you have your own private land, best to drive it on that property and not come on to regional water property.
Yeah, so and it's interesting too because I've talked to some of our environmental folks about it, and the one thing I learned too, which Jeff didn't mention, is invasive species. So you think, well, how does that connect to ATVs? So I'm sure you know, if you pay attention to the environment in the area we're in, like things like Japanese knotwood, right? So it spreads quick. If you got an ATV riding in areas, picking up some of that Japanese knotwood on its wheels, it just very quickly can spread that invasive species all over the place.
Stilt grass is another big one.
Yeah.
The seeds from that get spread by tires all the time.
Yeah. And Jeff mentioned erosion too. So when we talk about erosion, you're really degrading the water quality because you're causing this erosion into our drinking water sources. So now the water's muddier, it's harder to treat. It actually leads to higher costs because, the harder the water is to treat, the more expensive it is to treat. So the things we can do to protect that area and keep it pristine, we do. And one of those is to keep those ATVs out of the area. So it's really a incredibly important. The RWA, like I said, we work with local police departments. We've actually worked with some of the news channels to kind of get the word out there about these ATVs and these dirt bikes in our area because it ruins the experience for everybody. So I wanted to quickly, before we go, we only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to talk about some of the other things. They're not directly related to the recreation program, but they are related to our environmental program and our watershed program. And that's it. You can get some other permits from the water company, like timber harvesting. So we actually have a firewood program. And Jeff, you can jump in. I'll just kind of quickly talk about it. But if you want to, you can actually get a permit from us, and we will give you a chunk of land where you can go in, right, and chop down your own firewood.
Right. Our forester will mark the specific trees that they feel need to go for improving the forest health. And you could go out there, you take their chainsaw safety test. You have to make sure that you're safe out there. But yeah, you could pay for the amount of wood that you cut.
Yeah, and it's a pretty cool program, and it's really, we're giving you the land and the trees to cut, but in return, you actually do have to cut those trees down because, it doesn't work if you don't cut them down. And like Jeff said, we do have a certified forester who really determines which trees can come down, and as long as you cut the ones he tags, it's a good relationship. We also have maple tapping. We have a permit for folks if they want to come tap some of our maple trees, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and that's, I think, look on the website or contact us for more. I think it's like 50 cents a tap.
Yeah. There's a base fee of a certain amount, and then you pay by how many trees that you're tapping, but it's a small amount per tree.
Yeah, I've heard it's about 25 to 30% of what you would pay in other places. We also allow beekeepers to come on and set up hives. I will tell you, I don't know a ton about that program. We also have Christmas tree farms. We lease our lands to Christmas tree farmers to allow them to do that. So there's a lot of things that the RWA is doing that folks may not know about, and it's all towards treating the environment with the respect it deserves. I will say, if you have any questions about what Jeff has talked about, what I talked about, where can they email, Jeff?
They could send an email to askrecreation at rwater.com.
Water. I think it's ask.recreation.
It could be. It's on the
it's on the website.
Just click on the link on our
If you go to rwater.com in the community, you'll see the tab for the recreation program. All of this information is there. You can email us at ask.recreation@rwater.com. And I do have one final question for you, Jeff, before we close down this liquid lunch today. Can I bring my dog?
Unfortunately, no. I love dogs as much as the next person, but we ask that everybody keeps their dogs at home when they come to our properties. And it's more than just the droppings. We know some people aren't the best about picking up after their dogs, so it can be a water quality issue. And we always get the argument, well, the geese and the ducks and the deer in the area do their business near the water too. But more than that, we get people, our concern is two dogs interacting on the trail that may not be the friendliest, hikers interacting that with an unfriendly dog, or since there is very wild areas, we've had coyotes and raccoons and different things like that may not be the healthiest. We have come across some rabid animals, but some animals are very territorial, and if you're walking through the area and it's coyote breeding season, there may be an issue with some of the wildlife, and we don't want your dog chasing the rabbits and the deer and pulling you down the trail going after something like that when they see it. So it's a risk. There's a lot of different areas. Like I said, we have 9 recreation areas. There are hundreds in the state where you can take your dog to. So for some people, it is a benefit. They do buy their permits because we don't allow dogs on our trails and we don't allow motorized vehicles on our trails. So if you're looking for some more peaceful areas, some more quiet hikes and things like that, that's a reason that people come to us.
And our police force will kick you out if they see you.
We have our
dog.
police and we have our rec staff. We have about 12 people on staff. So the guys who work at Lake Saltonstall, and then we have people monitoring the trails and the parking lots. They go out, they make their rounds. They really make up the staff. And I just want to give a shout out to all the rec staff that help me out. They make my job a lot easier being their manager. They know what they're doing. They're great. We have some real seasoned guys out there, and they make my job easy by doing what they do out there. And we really appreciate their hard work.
Great. Thank you to those folks. So as we end the show, the one thing I want listeners to really take away from this conversation is the RWA really is dedicated to protecting these watershed areas that are responsible for supplying drinking water to 430,000 consumers in the area. But we're also dedicated to opening those areas to the people who live in the areas and sharing those lands and those experiences, because if we learned anything from COVID, it's getting outdoors really is the healthiest thing you can do. So if you've been thinking about getting into the great outdoors, go on our website, learn more about our program, grab yourself a permit, and get out there. So with that, you've been listening to Liquid Lunch with the RWA. I'm your host, Kevin Watsey, and today we learned all about the RWA's recreation program with our guest, Jeff Yale, the program specialist who runs the program for the RWA. If you missed any portion of today's show, you can always go on the New Haven Independence Facebook page, Twitter page, YouTube page. We're all over there. You can listen to the show over and over again if we were talking too fast and you didn't get all the notes you needed to get. So join us again in 2 weeks for another edition of Liquid Lunch, and stay hydrated, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks.